What about looking into the future? If you think about, what any of these statistics suggest for the years ahead, is there something, if you can take these numbers and kind of extrapolate where we're going, looking ahead, Sean, where we're going to be, say, 5 years from now?
Uh, Many of the same issues. I think with cloud, I hope we'll see a little bit of normalization. You won't see people saying they're going to invest in cloud, but rather they're going to spend on cloud. It's a little bit different, right? Because it's CapEx versus OpEx kind of question. The lack of IT resources issue, I hope, will not become as much of an issue because things will get, hopefully, easier. And more importantly, there are, I know we just talked a little bit about BPM, but there's increasing tools for DevOps, so you cut out the middleman, as it were, with DevOps. Still nascent in a lot of industries, but you can do more with less. I'm a big fan of orchestration tools, things like Puppet, Chef, and Ansible. Full disclosure, I use Puppet. So instead of having 10 network administrators manage 1,000 servers, you have one guy manage 1,000 servers. So
how do you personally use Puppet? Just curious on that one.
Sorry?
How do you use Puppet, you yourself?
How do I use Puppet? As a master manifest, because I have a couple WordPress sites and other things that I help deploy.
Yeah.
So just a simple image, use it to push out, match it with Docker so that it's pretty straightforward. So it's a simple, reproducible way to do a deploy time and again without having to figure it out each and every time.
Did you just use the D word, Sean? Docker?
Well, you can't have. There's a couple things. I know Chris mentioned the holy quintuplet. A couple things that I have to mention in every store. Right? We have to talk containers and Docker.
Right.
You have to say mobile, and you have to say IoT. We haven't said IoT or Docker, so I had to squeeze those two things inside.
For sure. Have we not properly covered Internet of Things? It's curious to me about IoT is that it gets a lot of buzz, and it was certainly mentioned in the survey, absolutely. But it seems like it is far closer to its infancy than anything even vaguely resembling maturity.
We're in the top half of the first inning on the IoT, James.
Right.
I mean, we're just starting. There's no question about it. I just led a panel yesterday on the IoT. I'm looking ahead at the IoT at the Integrate conference, small conference here in Santa Clara, and I had a guy from IBM on it, a guy from Qualcomm, and two others. A really interesting topic, and we're looking ahead at things, and it's like it's so early. It's so early. You can say we've got plenty of video cams out there right now. I mean, entire cities are covered by video cams, it seems like, and all that data is in the IoT, and then all the sensors that we have, and then the heart monitors that we have, and in the cars and everything else. But we're just scratching the surface on this stuff,
Right.
And it's just interesting to see the creative powers that are coming to be in the IoT. We're only just seeing the beginning of it right now. There's no question.
Katrina, your thoughts on the IoT trend? Are we headed upward? Are we there yet? First of all, is your coffee machine talking to your refrigerator yet? Are they all connected to the internet? Can you program your coffee machine through your app? Is what I really want to know.
I'm predicting that things will quickly be connected without my knowledge, and they'll be spying on me from all corners. But
we already are, Katrina. Just so you know, we already are.
I guess in 5 years, I mean, if we think that security is an unclimbable mountain right now, it's just going to get worse. People want to pile on to the IoT and have all of these, mile-high ideas about what can be done with it, and then a little bit later they'll say, oh, well, now we've created even more breach opportunities or network openings or what have you, and we need to go unplug those. So it's really, really, really going to be frustrating for enterprise IT groups, let alone the rest of us, to keep up with what's happening there. Compliance is just going to kind of become a much bigger, much bigger issue as well. Right now, that is a little bit confined to the responsibility of in certain quarters, and just as security is everybody's job now, compliance will become everybody's job as well.
Yeah, on the IoT connected coffee maker, I'd be lying if I said I didn't have. But mine is a kind of workaround. I've got a Wemo switch plugged into my Tassimo. It's all set to on, and then I just have the timer go off at 6 in the morning. because that smell of coffee in the morning is what gets me going. Otherwise, I'd be in big trouble.
Wait, are you telling me that you're somehow able to program that through the web?
It's a workaround. I have it plugged into the switch, and I have the switch turn on at 6 in the morning.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that's all it is. For me, IoT though, what's interesting though right now is the shakeout between protocol specifications. So the internet, the early age, you think, okay, Ethernet, okay, everybody uses Ethernet today. It wasn't always necessarily going to be that way. It could have been something else. In IoT, we have 802.11, right, standard Wi-Fi. There are lots of people who like to talk to me about Zigbee. There are other people who talk about Z-Wave, which apparently isn't quite Zigbee, but something related. Google is now pushing its technology. What do they call it? Thread. There are half a dozen other IoT-related foundations that have their various protocols, and it'll be very interesting to see what shakes. And then there's Bluetooth LTE. So you have 4, maybe 5 different protocols. Some encapsulate over Ethernet, some don't. It'll be very interesting to see because for the first time in at least 10 years, we've got multiple protocols where people are transferring stuff, and not everything is IP-based, which is very interesting. So I think there's a little bit of an interim step here. Ultimately, what I think everything will go back to Ethernet because Mr. Metcalf was not wrong. You never, ever, ever bet against Ethernet because you will lose. But
Sean, each of those protocols has a job to do, and they're all a little bit different. Don't you think there's room for all of them?
You know what? If there's one thing that Ethernet has taught us, I think, is that people like simplicity. So if you've got, like I've got Z-Wave, I think, and I've got a Thread because I've got Nest in my house. I don't have visibility into the Thread or the Z-Wave. I'm not really quite sure what happens until they touch my router. So what are those two Nest? I got a couple Nest Protects. What are they saying to each other? I don't know. Yes, they all have their own responsibilities and role, but at one point, not all that long ago, you remember our printers. We would plug our printers in through a printer port. What happened to that? People used to say to me, "Yeah, the printer port has a role, right? LPT1." That's gone. You plug your printer over Ethernet today. You don't bother it any other way. It's
good point.
So for simplicity's sake, I think over time, what has happened though is Ethernet. Why a lot of guys, a lot of developers, men and women will tell me is Ethernet is chatty. IP protocol. It takes a lot of power, and a lot of these IoT devices are low power type devices, are not always on, etc. That's where Bluetooth, Thread, Zigbee kind of come in. But I think the next wave of 802.11, which is 802.11ad, we won't see that till 2017, maybe 2019 in the market. I think that will shift. So I think there's, like I said, an interim period where we'll see multiple things. I think within the next 5 years, everything will settle back down at some kind of 802.11 Ethernet base. Everything will be a lot easier because then it's standard tools that everybody's used to for managing your printer, your phone, your webcam. Everything's the same. Why would you want different tools? It's too hard.
Okay. You're actually predicting in the years ahead that the protocols will streamline into one coherent protocol?
Yeah.
Wow.
Only because I'm a student of history, and that's what's happened before. Why won't it happen again?
Hey, write that story, Sean. I want to see that.
I want to see the comment section for that story.
Yeah.
Comments are another thing. Comments are wonderful, and I encourage everyone on this Hangout to comment on the related stories here. And please, positive comments. We love positive comments.
That'll do it, Sean.
One thing about the future I think is interesting. Looking at the report, the wearables in IoT getting a lot of buzz, but still, in the early innings, as you say, Chris. But I think what's going to happen is it means the technology is going to be ever more omnipresent in our lives, more than ever before. Yeah. And I think it's going to partially get even more blur the line between enterprise tech and retail tech. I mean, where is the information coming from? Where is it going? It's a continuation of the consumerization of IT.
Absolutely.
And I also think it's going to push big data because if we're already drowning in data now, what happens if suddenly our smart devices are creating even more data? So that says to me that big data is going to get even far larger in the years, exponentially larger in the years ahead.
Yeah, that's where managed service providers are going to be coming in. They're going to be coming in. That is already a huge growth area right now, and taking care of all of this stuff for businesses. And more and more of these functions of the storage and the accessibility and the security and the networking are going to be you asked for the future. This is what I'm seeing. More and more into bigger and bigger data centers. Apple's going to build a new data center right next door to Facebook's two data centers in Prineville, Oregon.
Wow.
Because they have prevailing wind from the south, and they channel the wind into the data center and then through the servers and then out the other end. Facebook figured that out. Apple's going to do that next. We're going to be seeing more and more of those kind of things. And those functions that we're talking about here are all going to be concentrated in these big, huge data centers. And that kind of worries me to an extent. A lot of power, a lot of functionality, centrally located in one place. I don't know about that, but that's where it's going.
You know, I'm thinking if there are ever infrastructures that had redundant backup, it is those two infrastructures. I mean, they will probably be going long after the rest of us have gone down.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, you could be right.
You know, maybe we've said it all. I want to make sure we don't have any, closing thoughts. You know, Sean, some jewel of wisdom you want to make sure you impart?
Yeah, well, I don't know about jewel of wisdom. We'll call it a nugget of truth, maybe. As I'm looking at things, because I would like to think of myself as a network guy first, is one of the things that participants on both sides noted as I'm looking at data in front of me was they're not necessarily going to continue to, they're not looking at the network as a source of investment. All these things that we're talking about, whether it's wearables at one end, big data, et cetera, at some point everything boils down to the network. So I would encourage both IT and business professionals not to neglect their networks. There are things that can be done, whether it's faster bandwidth, continuing to improve the quality of your switches, continuous reinvestment. Just because the study bothered me a little bit that way. People buy new phones every 2 years, but how often do you buy a network switch? Not that you should buy a network switch every 2 years, but I would love to see continued investment into the network, and there's real opportunities there too. Study didn't talk too much about that, but one of the big things that's changed for me anyway, and a lot of the people I talked to over the last year, is the amount of wired to wireless. Everybody still has a little bit of wired, but I see a lot that's not just mobility, but we're talking wireless for everything. There's an increasing amount of wireless for everything.
Right.
Whether notebook, wearable, phone, this, that. Even offices. I see offices where they don't even bother to wire stuff anymore. They just do everything, deploy a couple 802.11 AC access points, and that's it. So it's an interesting shift, and I would just encourage people to heap praise on their network administrators. They may not be doing virtualization and other work, but the network is the backbone of all IT.
Okay.
Kachina, any closing thought? I think we may have said it, but I want to make sure we didn't leave anything out there.
I think we probably came pretty close. I guess I just think that it's going to be so interesting to watch a more convergence of things like the smart technologies and what we call artificial intelligence and robotics and things like that, where the enterprise is going to lead. The enterprise is going to lead on security solutions. The enterprise is going to lead on higher quality materials than what might be used in some of these early consumer-oriented solutions. So I really see a little bit more emphasis on enterprise and business solutions being created now than measuring how many steps you take. I mean, that's fun for all of us to do, but we're really on the verge of some life-changing and workplace-changing ideas.
Clearly. Mr. Primesberger, one last thought from you to bring us up.
I'll leave you with an image. Okay?
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Now, we talked about the convergence. We've been talking about the convergence of all these things happening now. The smart technology, the devices, the amount of data we've got to deal with, all the things that we write about and talk about all day long and we use all day long. Think about all the convergence of all those things. Now, I would like to take you back 109 years to San Francisco in 1906. When you're finished here, go to YouTube and type in 1906 San Francisco streetcar.
Okay.
You will get a video. It's about an 11-minute video. It's brilliant. And the person just locked it onto a streetcar, and it's going down Market Street. toward the Ferry Building, right downtown, and you'll see this is the technology of 1906. Horses, there's a car, there's a people running, there's a train, there's a streetcar, and there's no organization. There are no street lights.
Oh, it's all free form, and not
it's free form.
Yeah.
Take a look at that. That is what we have today in IT.
I think you're right about that. I've often had that same thought. Like, there is no quote unquote referee. There is no like authority that's sort of regulating the whole thing. It's all exploding outward, and it's hard to say what exactly is going to happen, but also how exactly the component parts are going to interface with each other, and what the result of that is going to be. That remains a huge question.
And the standards are never going to catch up. I think IT is always going to be ahead of the standards, way ahead. And if you go back 109 years, that was the technology of transportation and of the city back then. It's total chaos, and people almost get hit. You know, it's really comical. But I would say just go to YouTube, 1906 earthquake, no, 1906 San Francisco streetcar, and see it, and apply that to today, and you'll see.
And yet we somehow survived. I guess that's the one ray of sunlight that I'll take away from that. We did somehow survive.
I completely agree with Chris, and I think that's an interesting analogy. I had a professor at university many years ago who had this, who believed very strongly in chaos theory, and his theory was that chaos was the natural order of the universe, and that it was the human directive to create order of that chaos. So, you know, the universe, in this case IT, by its nature is chaotic, and then as humans we're just trying to create order out of it, and that's just the process that remakes itself time and again.
Yep.
And on that, I thank the three of you very much. A lot of good stuff, and the research report, I recommend people download that. It's a lot of good facts and statistics. Very interesting, actually. So thank you very much, and we can all tweet it and promote it.
See you, James.
All right, bye-bye.
Thanks, James. Bye.
Bye-bye.